And I hope I can figure out where I recorded it too when this is all over. It's somewhere in the cloud.
It should
Well,
pop up as soon as you end the meeting, then it pops up in a window as a file.
oh, thank you, Sydney. I see this has been a learning year in so many ways, and I've quit trying to act like I know everything or that I know anything. And I will take instruction wherever it comes from. And you definitely have to be humble this year as you learn new things. Uh, as the title says, we're talking about our year with in special education because I think we have faced some unique challenges as special education teachers. And I think we need to celebrate our victories and also talk about things we wish we had done better or we ran into roadblocks. Um, so this is just going to be, if you have something to say it. It's not going to be really necessarily instructional. Maybe you have things to share, but just share some of the things you've encountered. I know this year I have gotten very good with Zoom. I love they got us Surface Pros at the beginning of the year, or actually last summer. And at first I was like, I want my iPad back. And I still love the iPad. I have one for my personal use, but I've learned to appreciate the Surface Pro and its versatility. And I've gotten to be really good with Microsoft Whiteboard. And I just discovered this week or last week that my students on their Surface Go devices, they can access their own Microsoft whiteboards. And we've been having fun with that. I've been having them, and I'm working on getting a class set of Microsoft pens for them, not as complex as my wonderful Microsoft pen that came with our device. This I call my magic pen. I love this thing, and it does so many wonderful, wonderful things for me. And so I've gotten pretty good with that. And to be honest, I'm pretty proud of myself this year. Most of my students have been in person most of the year because we tried remote for about 2 weeks and that did not go well. And so we were able to get permission for our SpEd students to come to school full time since they were the only ones in the building. It's not like the hallways were crowded, and we stayed in our room. We even did our electives via remote, and they were able to succeed that way because we had paras sitting right next to them helping them access their uh, electives. So we've had them in person most of the year, but I did have two students who have been remote for different reasons. So I've been juggling in person and remote. And usually for our group lessons, I call them my Zoom girls because they're both girls, and they're with us for our group lessons. And then I have the paras work with my in-person students while I work one-on-one, 2-to-1 with my Zoom girls. And we do our reading and our math. It's not ideal, and I don't know that they've learned as much as they would have learned in person, but you got to go with what you got. And at least they and their parents have made the effort to keep the girls connected. And so I agree with um, Mrs. Smoke that we need to celebrate ourselves. We've made it through a very challenging time. And this is a time that no teacher has lived through since 1918. There's been other challenges for teachers. I mean, there were teachers who survived World War II, and that was a pretty big deal. and but this is definitely a unique period in history, and we did it. Maybe we could have done things better, and maybe we went right when we should have gone left for something, sometimes, but we made it. And I think it's important that we celebrate that fact and celebrate the fact that we have juggled so many balls and kept them going. um, it's not a time to be humble in this sense. It's be humble and accept instruction when it comes to new technology, but give yourself a pat on the back for all you have accomplished this year and the fact that your students are reasonably well balanced. They have survived. My kids have been surprisingly flexible, which is not a characteristic many SpEd kids have. They have really just gone with the flow and the constant changes in hybrid and in person and remote, and they have gone with it. And I'm kind of amazed at how well my SpEd kids have done. So I'd like to open it up to you. If you want to brag about yourself a little bit, you can brag to us because we're all feeling the same way. If there's a technology that you have mastered or at least become fairly well versed in, share it. But if there's something that you're just don't you have never quite figured out how to make it work for your SpEd people, share that too. You can share things in the chat if you want. Deb will let me know if there's something we need to discuss. But I just want to open it up to you and hear some of your victories.
Well, I'll go with just one with my families with the hybrid.
Mhm.
They were, they had constant questions like, why didn't the password work? What is the password? And just trying to get to me while I'm, with kids on our hybrid day or our full Zoom days were Wednesday. And so they knew that Seesaw app, the messaging app part of it, I would see that so much faster than my email because I didn't have to weed through everything.
Yeah.
So they got on a first name basis. It was like, hey, Deb, I need to know this isn't working. How do I do this? Oh, I'm going to get them this, or the other thing. And it felt like we really bonded as families and teachers
Yeah.
because we were all like not judging each other. We were there to support each other. And I do feel like I usually bond with my parents, but not like I bonded with them this year. It definitely brought us together.
I experienced the same thing, especially with my remote kids, their parents. We just have had to keep in constant communication, and I had some wonderful parents to work with, and we gave each other grace. And there were times I messed up and I posted the wrong Zoom link, and and I had to go back and say, I'm so sorry. And the parents were just great about it. And there were times I had to extend grace to them because something had gone wrong. And I agree. And even my students who are in person, we've had to keep in contact more than ever. And that's been kind of a nice side benefit of, there are a few good things that did come out of our Corona year. And one thing is we have gotten to know our parents a little better. So I can get on board with that, Deb. I'm curious, where's everybody from? Because I know we have so many people who are out from outside of Olathe. And I know, Ariel, you're from Olathe. You want to share what you teach?
Sure. So in previous years, I had been a 5th grade teacher, but this year is my first year as a title math teacher for the district.
Okay.
So I've really been enjoying that role, and it's kind of a different role in working with all sorts of students, including, of course, SpEd students.
Yeah.
And so I've enjoyed it every minute of it. It's been a big switch for me, but I've loved it.
That's cool. Sydney, how about you? Where do you teach?
I teach at Eudora Elementary School. I am their autism teacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Stacy?
I am the assistant band director at Southwest Middle School in Lawrence, Kansas. But before that, I was a teacher's aide at Prairie Trail Middle School. So
Okay.
Olathe so well. Yeah.
You know whereof we speak.
Yes.
Juliana, you want to share who you are with all these people?
Sure. I'm one of the behavior coaches for the Olathe School District.
How about you, Jennifer?
I did teach SpEd before. That's all my background, pretty much in SpEd.
Oh, okay. I
taught
did not know that.
Yeah, I was a resource teacher and then I was an ED teacher.
Okay. Oh, ED. That's fun.
Actually, I loved it. So
if you find your niche, you do love it, and you're crazy for loving it because
Yeah, and
you
it's
know,
sometimes
but
it's hard
when,
to listen. Sometimes it's kind of hard to listen, like Deb saying that she got
Yeah.
closer to her students, and I'm like, "Ugh, I don't even have my group of kids anymore.
yeah,
I miss that connection. The connection with
that connection is what keeps me going. I don't know if I would ever want, I don't, it'd be really hard to leave the classroom.
it was very, very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had some circumstances that was like, okay, it's time to go, because I was not in agreement with,
Mhm.
I was in another district. I was not in agreement what they wanted to do with the ED kids. They
Okay.
basically want to pull all of them for inclusion. And that for me was just like, are you kidding me? How are they going to learn how to get better, you
Yeah.
know? So,
You can't, it's not one size fits all, and they should know
Yeah.
that in SpEd.
and I
So,
just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So it was time. And physically it was kind of like getting on me sometimes. As you
Yeah.
get older, it's kind of hard.
I'm feeling that too,
Yeah.
that physically it's getting harder.
Yes.
Jennifer, how about you? Who are you and where do you teach?
I'm Jennifer Jones, and I'm a school psychologist at Olathe Northwest.
Okay. Tanisha? Tanisha with her, is that a lighthouse for your picture? It's cool. Makes me think of faraway places. Well, Tanisha, whenever you want to jump in, we're here, ready to listen. So name something you struggled with this year. I mean, I know we all struggled with the change in schedules, et cetera, but is there something you personally, you were trying to master Zoom and it just wasn't going well, or maybe it's a piece of technology that you could not figure out how to make this particular device work for you? What's a challenge that some of you faced?
A challenge that I'm still working through on Zoom. While I do feel like I've learned Zoom very well, I'm sometimes struggle to make sure that I'm presenting the best format that I can when assessing students remotely, because
Yeah,
that can be a huge challenge. And I'm thinking of SpEd students in particular, where what might work for non-SpEd students or some students, whether they're SpEd or not, does not work for other students. So when assessing, especially wanting to make sure that we're keeping fidelity with assessments and just for progress monitoring purposes and just really wanting to make sure that that is a genuine, true answer, I struggle sometimes with the best format and ways to do that in a remote Zoom.
and it is a challenge. There have been some goals that just were not measurable remotely. They just, like student independence and things like that, and that you really have to be in the classroom setting. And so I would just include that in the progress monitoring. I'd say this, we're in the middle of Corona and we couldn't measure this with any integrity. It wouldn't have been accurate data. And that was how about anybody else? Has anybody else experienced something similar or something different?
So I am a first year teacher, so lots of different
Bless your
things.
heart.
But well, I feel like it's not as bad as people make it out to seem, because I don't know what really was
Yeah.
on the other side. I mean, I was an intern for like a semester and a half before Corona, but I mean, I was still learning then too. But I think something that I struggle with is paras, not for lack of anything that they do,
Mhm.
just the simple fact that paras are moving in and out because of Corona or because
Mhm.
it's not for them. And that's generally what happens anyways. And then
Yeah.
Corona's added on top of it, no subs, nothing. And so how to make that work? And then the para dynamic, I've had a couple paras that have been there all year for years in the same class who know what they want to do and sometimes think they know what they want to do. And the new paras not having any idea what they should do, and older paras not being very
Not wanting
accepting.
to listen to the kid.
Yes. Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
they'll listen to me, but other paras that could be valuable.
And I think, like you said, some of that's true in any year. I did not realize when I was going through and getting my degree that I would basically be in charge of a team, and that I would be managing people, because that's not my skill set. And I did not realize that that would be expected of me. And it took me a long time to get fairly good at it. It was hard for me to tell people what to do. That's not my personality. My personality is nurturing and encouraging, and I had to learn, usually the hard way, that paras need direction. They want to do well, but they have to know what to do and how I want it done. And I need to be very clear in my expectations, because let's face it, it's not fair of me to become annoyed with them for not doing it the way I want it if I didn't really explain how I want it. And I had to put on my big girl panties and be a boss. And I didn't like that at first, but now I understand it's for the benefit of the kids. And I try to be very clear in my expectations. I try to, it's not that I don't listen to my paras. I have, this year especially, I have such wonderful, wonderful paras. They've been doing it a long time. One of them has been with me so long, she knows my brain. And she a lot of times will anticipate what I need before I even ask her. And that's really cool. But I listen to their input. A lot of times they'll say, this is not working. The reading workbook we're using, he's just not connected. And I'll say, let's try something else then. And I wouldn't know that if they didn't speak up and tell me. Or they might have a suggestion, why don't we try such and such? And if I have a reason why that won't work, I'll tell them. Because I also had to realize I'm the one with the master's degree. And most of my paras have a high school education, which is great. There's not a thing wrong with that. But I'm the one that's been trained the most. And to be honest, it's my name on the door. And if something goes wrong, it's
And
gonna
on the IP.
be me on the
Yeah.
line.
Yep.
And that's just the reality of it. And I think as you get older, it'll become a little easier. It is hard when you're in your first year, but I've gotten better at it. It's again not my favorite part of the job, bossing people around, but I have to think of what the kids need. And I have found as I manage my team better, they feel more confident and they're able to do their jobs better. And it's something they don't prepare you for in your teaching classes. That's that. And I also wish they had taught me how to teach a Down syndrome girl how to change a pad, because I had that my first year and it had never occurred to me that this is hard, and especially with a Down syndrome girl, she's got short, stubby fingers and it takes a lot of dexterity. And I'm like, they didn't prepare me for this. So I hear what you're saying, Sydney.
Yeah, I was going to mention something about paraprofessionals. And Rhonda, I was quite the opposite of you. I was pretty good at telling people what to do and how to do it. I create manuals for them. I was down to the rule. Like we had procedures and protocols for everything, but I really had to work on the nurturing piece and the relationship with them. I hadn't mentioned this before, and the other two I have attended. I have to be very intentional about the relationship piece because it doesn't come natural to me. So I had to make time. So I became better with my team, like because I was with the paras all the time.
Yeah.
But I really had to develop that culture, that little thing between my team. And once you have that, I mean, it was easier to tell them, hey girl, you kind of like messed up today. What can we do to fix? It was easier to have those tough conversations because I knew them. Yes. I had a relationship with them. I'm never going to forget this para. Was last year before COVID, of course. And she came to me and she was crying. And she told me I messed up. And I knew she had messed up. I mean, was not good. she restrained a kid that didn't need to be restrained. And she was crying and she was not, she knew. But if I didn't have a relationship with her, would be just one of the conversations that should be like this, taking everything personal instead of just crying, telling me that she messed up. And we just went through the conversation. I hugged her, she cried, and I said, I understand it sucks feeling like you did something wrong, but what can we do differently? And it took 5 minutes instead of 30 minutes of a meeting, like trying to get them to understand that they messed up.
And that's true.
Yeah. And you have to have those tough conversations. And maybe you didn't have a lot of tough conversations in your first year, but they will come.
They do. And I don't like them, but
I don't like them either.
it's the job. And
But you cannot shy away from them though, because we need to use those opportunities as a learning momentum to keep things going when it comes to parent relationship and just working with them. I had a handbook in my classroom that was very, very helpful because we went through it's not a handbook. I think I called handbook. I don't even know what I called. I created this document, Para Educators Handbook. I don't even remember the name, but we had like, what do you do during the day, the expectations, progress monitoring, and all sort of things that they did. One year I had to add, stay off your cell phone. Did I want to put this there?
Yeah.
No, but at least when I went over through the year with them, if we had the problem, I'll pull the handbook and like, remember we talked about this at the beginning of the year. I hated that I had to treat them like a kid, but dude, your priority is the kid.
Yeah. No, I 100% hear what you're saying. And I've begun writing things down more. And I have specific schedules every day for which para is with which student for that time period, and what they should be doing. And it really helps. And the paras like knowing I'm with this child during this block, and there's no question about it. And I also try to rotate them quite a bit, because I don't believe in giving one para to one student, because then if the para is gone, that student may have a complete meltdown all day long because his para is not there. And also, it's not fair to assign one para all the time to the most difficult kid in the class. And so they know, okay, I have to spend 90 minutes with this one who may be throwing things against the wall the whole time. But then I get to work with this real sweet girl that, so they know that they're not stuck with a difficult situation all day. And I will say about my paras this year, they have had to learn technology that is way out of their comfort zone, and they have rocked it. And they have really, really put themselves out there and stepped outside their comfort zones and gotten so good and at so many tasks. And there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, learning how to access the electives remotely and how to do this with their students. And I have to hand it to them. They did a great job. But I had to do a lot of troubleshooting. And I'm not a technology expert by any means, but I did have more training than they did. And a lot of times it was figuring it out together. But there were times, this is not working, Mrs. Stock. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. But I didn't say that because, I wanted to keep everybody calm. And I'd say, well, let me look at it. And I'd figure it out. I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell them what I did, but I would figure it out. So that was a lot of learning as we went this year. So I can appreciate that. Does anybody else was there a certain technology or device that you struggled with? I know I struggled with my online learners. It's not like a gen ed student who understands how to click on Google. I don't care that Google is on their homepage, or Google Classroom, I'm sorry. It just my two Zoom girls got confused every single time. So I had to figure out ways to help them access, for example, the homework they would have in their elective classes. And I had to figure out ways to help them access it without relying on Google Classroom. I might ask the teacher to include me in her classroom, and then I could pull it up on my device and then do a screen share. And that, or if worst came to worst, I could read it aloud with them and say, this is what it says, so you tell me the answers you want. It just took a lot of building the airplane while we were flying it type of stuff, and figuring it out. Okay, this is not working. Let's try this. Did anybody experience anything like that? Did you run into any challenges with your remote learners?
Just a small thing. At the beginning of the year, when a student who is now in person was remote, when we were working on writing, it's something small, but it made a big difference to me. I would write on a whiteboard for him to copy and just hold it
Mhm.
till he finished.
Mhm.
Well, sometimes it would take him like 5-10 minutes to write one sentence, which is like a long time to just
Yeah.
be having your hands right
Yeah.
here. So I was like, Jamboard. I'm gonna do a Jamboard and I'm just gonna type it. I mean,
I
mean,
want to get more
yeah.
proficient at Jamboard. I haven't used that one a lot, and I'd like to get more proficient at it. I think it would be a good addition to my repertoire. And
Yeah, it's
yeah.
helpful.
Well, I also found I have one girl, one of my remote girls, she kind of shuts down. She's fairly high functioning for my class, and she's capable of probably second grade work, but sometimes she'll just shut down and she doesn't want to respond and she doesn't want to answer question. I finally figured out that if I tell her, you can put it in the chat, she will respond. And so instead of saying A, B, or C, she'll actually type it in the chat. And she usually gets the right answer. So that works for her. She likes that a lot. It took me a long time to get her to turn on her camera so I could see her face. I finally had to tell her that I'm not going to count her present if she doesn't show her face. So usually I get this much of her. I get a good view of her bangs, and that's okay. She's making at least some effort. I've also found that with remote kids, if they don't feel like talking, the thumbs up, thumbs down response, they like that, so they don't have to talk. I don't know why they don't want to talk sometimes. They talk enough when they're in class. I don't know why suddenly, because it's remote, they don't want to talk. But the thumbs up, thumbs down. We've also done the thumbs up, I don't know, thumbs down, uh, holding up fingers. I sent home whiteboards for my two Zoom girls, and sometimes they'll get out their whiteboards and show me. Mostly I just gave them options, and I would try to find different ways for them to do things. If one thing wasn't working, then we'd try something else. And I would try to keep that variety going. That's a good point, Sydney.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder, some students are worried that their parents, what they'll do if they hear them talking out of line in class. And I've experienced some of that, Sydney. At the beginning of the year, when all the students were remote, I had one student, is wonderful student. I mean, wonderful family. They've had other kids in our school, but mom or dad felt it necessary to sit right next to the student. And we would be going to through a lesson, and I would be asking questions. Well, he's very ADHD, so he may be laying on the bench because they would do their work in the kitchen, but he'd still be answering me. He'd still be giving me what I needed for the lesson, and I was okay with that. But parents were worried that he wasn't sitting up straight, and he wasn't, and in my classroom, we have some flexibility with how they present the lesson and how we let them answer. And he's one that needs to stand up a lot. He's one that needs to walk around the room a lot. And so I'm okay with that. But parents who they may understand what a special needs child is, but they may not have spent much time in a special needs classroom. And so that the parent would kind of would try to correct the kid. And I would want to say, just leave him alone. He's giving me answers. He knows his stuff. But at least, I had to give credit to the parent for trying their best to keep the kid engaged. And again, it was a matter of extending grace to everyone. Oh, that's interesting, Jennifer. That's a great idea. Jennifer Jones says, we learned and research supports that students do not like looking at themselves on Zoom. Lots of self-judgment. We taught our students to pin the teacher. Also helped with our students with ADHD and autism. That is a really nice little nugget of information. I did not think of that. And I can see, especially at the middle school level, they really don't like looking into themselves. So that's, I'm going to jot that down so I don't forget it.
And our students with autism, they like to make faces at themselves.
Well, yeah.
And so they would distract
Yeah.
the whole class and the
Yeah.
teaching and all of that. So we helped them set up to pin the
Yeah.
teacher as well. And that was really useful.
That's a really good idea. I hadn't thought of that. And I can see where that would be an issue with kids on the autism spectrum, that they're making faces at themselves. I'm imagining some of my kids who've been in person, but if they, if they were on camera, that we might run into that. That's funny. I can just imagine some of the things would be going on. But and I had the one student that also was standing and moving around, and he also, the first couple of times we Zoomed, he wanted to show me all of his toys. And, he collects, he's really into Paw Patrol, and he's really into, trying to think what else the Tsum Tsums. Are you familiar with Tsum Tsums? TSUM. They have like Disney Tsum Tsums. They're little round cartoonish versions of, cartoons. But you can get them as stuffed animals, and you can get them as little rubber toy things. And he would have a whole collection of Tsum Tsums he had to show me. And that would always take up time. And I was trying to teach him that, okay, show me one or two, and then let's get to work. But did any of you run into that with some of your remote kids, that they were so excited to have their teacher seeing their house that they wanted to show you everything? And the reverse of that was some kids, not so much my students, but I know some of the gen ed teachers said some students don't want you to see where they live because they're ashamed or embarrassed, and which I get. That would be hard. So, you have to extend grace to those kids that they don't have their camera on because they don't want you to see where they live. It's this year has been a lot of balancing, balancing between your expectations of the students and balancing between the needs of the student. And there's that word grace again. I think both teachers and students have had to extend each other a lot of grace. I'm curious, what are some of the things you've learned during this challenging year that you want to take forward into the next school year, that no matter what it looks like, some good things that have come out of this year that you definitely want to make it part of who you are as a teacher?
I think the collaboration piece between me and general ed teachers, because general ed teachers are also collaborating with their whole grade level teams
Uh-huh.
and making the slideshows for the whole next week ahead. And so just being able to modify those ahead of time and getting materials and knowing what they're working on ahead of time is really beneficial. And I think it helps our students to be able to look at things ahead of time also sometimes. So I think just the collaboration piece of things, I'd love to continue.
I totally agree, especially with our elective teachers. They have been rock stars. They have just been so accommodating. And all I would have to do is send them an email and say, for whatever reason, they're not able to access it in this way, but they did the assignment, here's their responses. And the teachers would be like, great, I can accept that. We had one of my remote girls that she took art. She loves art. And she's actually a very gifted artist, but she did not know how to take a picture of her artwork and submit it to the teacher. So she had all these assignments done, but she didn't. My grandson just walked in, but she didn't know how to get it to the teacher. And so finally, I was ready to just come to her house and pick it up and take it into the teacher. But we finally figured out, she dropped it off at the front office and we turned it into the teacher, and that's all it took. So we found ways to accommodate, in spite of the kids' fears or lack of being able to access everything, and it worked out. A lot of it was just figuring out what it was that was keeping the student from succeeding. And in that case, she didn't know how to submit it online. She didn't understand how, and her parents weren't real savvy with technology, and they couldn't help her with it. And so that was something that was challenging. My other remote student, she was with Jennifer. Goodbye. I understand people have places to go. If you have to go meet someone for lunch, that's perfectly fine. But she stayed at her grandma's house during the day while her dad was at work. And so grandma was having to learn a whole bunch of new technology. And grandma was about my age, but if you don't use technology every day, it's not that she was stupid. She just didn't use it every day. So a lot of the most basic things she wasn't real familiar with, but grandma learned, and it was really kind of a cool thing to see grandma grow as in her abilities. But we just communicated, and she'd say, I am not figuring this out, and I would try to help, and eventually we'd get it figured out. So I know a lot of students struggled with, they didn't have anybody in the home who could help them with what they didn't understand. Did any of you run into any of that some of the kids struggled and there was no one to give them the tech support they needed? Well, we have a few more minutes. I would like to hear some successes. I'd like us, I want you to brag about yourself a little bit. Something I am really proud at how I've learned to do Zoom and do screen share with my class, and I can use the Microsoft whiteboard. I can use the pen, and I'm also proud that I'm continually learning, and I'm taking advantage of the epic sessions that our district offers every month, and I've attended a couple of them, and the next day I'm applying some of the things I've learned. So I'm proud of the fact that I have learned those things, and I'm an older teacher, so sometimes it's really hard. As they say, the older adults, we are not digital natives. Now, Sydney, you look like you're of an age, and Stacy, and maybe Juliana, because I don't know how old you are. you grew up with this stuff, and you grew up speaking the language of technology. Now, you may not be an expert in every single thing, but still it's much more natural to you than it is to someone like me. When I was in college, I took a computer class that, and it was a big deal to be able to take. Well, I'll tell you something. I'll go back to high school. I took a typing class, and we had like 4 electric typewriters. The rest were manual, and we rotated so we could all take turns. I learned to type on a manual typewriter. That's how old I am. And so a lot of this stuff, it's not my first language. I'm learning, and in some things I've become fluent, but the fact that I have learned these things makes me proud. And it's okay for you to be proud of your accomplishments. Do you have, Deb or Sydney or Juliana or Stacy, are there any things like that that you're proud of, or maybe relationships you've built with students? This is your chance to put false modesty aside.
I don't know. I think a big thing, it doesn't have anything to do with technology, but the one kid I was talking about that took 5 to 10 minutes to write one sentence at the beginning of the year, now he can write 3 to 5 sentences independently by himself without being able to repeat. So I mean, I'm super proud of that. And it's not just me, it's my parents too.
Oh,
I mean, it's a team effort, but man, I'm proud of him.
And I want you to hold on to that feeling, because you'll need it. Yeah. I keep a file of warm fuzzies. I call it my warm fuzzies file, that anytime I have a compliment or something, I put it in there to pull out on the days you're wondering if you're making any difference. But without you and the paras that worked with him, he wouldn't have achieved that on his own. So yay for you. That's something to hold on to. That's something to be proud of. How about you, Stacy? Or Juliana? Jump in there. Yeah, Juliana, what's something you're proud of?
I was going to say that being new to Olathe and having to adapt to Olathe way.
Yeah.
During the year in
Olathe way.
Olathe way, and that is Olathe way, and it's good. Sometimes not, but most of the time it's a good way. And having to learn all that stuff in a COVID year, and a lot of things I had to learn how to do it so I could teach others. Synergy is one of them, and for me that was just excruciating. And why? But okay, this is not a venting session. So there were things that were very, very challenging, and now I'm using all the stuff I had to learn to teach other people, not knowing that I would need those things, because we continue to do Zoom presentations and Neopod stuff. I never thought in a million years that I would have to create a Neopod. Now I can teach people how to create Neopods. I'm like, and if it was not for COVID year, I would not be learning those things. I would not be comfortable doing some of this stuff if it wasn't for COVID. So that's something I try to think of those things, because in a way, it's kind of like such a difficult year on some aspects, more in others, and some people were suffering more since they had to deal with the consequences of being sick, that kind of stuff. But it's just been a tough year overall. You're right, Sydney. Olathe does have a specific way to do things.
I just think it's funny that they actually call it the Olathe way, and that's how it's referred to, it's fine. I have no problem with it, but it amuses me. How about you, Stacy?
Well, one success is first of all, trying to do beginning band online was a challenge in itself, but we also had, now we're fully in person except those who are still remote, but we had a 6th grade percussionist who is very special needs, and he's still online, but his mom, kudos to his mom, we've really built a relationship. She's online with him. He's a percussionist, and she's there helping him play bells and helping him play drums. And at first, I'll admit, it was a little intimidating because she was always on Zoom. So I'm like, I need to make sure to include him and be on top of it. But now we've actually built this relationship, and we talk back and forth, and just that's something I hope continues even after this. The fact that they were so involved, and I'd love to have even more special needs kids making music because they really enjoy it.
They do. I wish there was a way to have a music class sometimes just for my special needs kids, because, and I said this in the last session I attended that was talking about art. I think the arts, all the arts, are so important to our kids, and I think it's a mistake not to help kids access that, because I think it opens areas of the brain that aren't opened otherwise. You know, it activates those synapses and it activates those neurons and all that other stuff that I think I wish that my kids had more access to some of those things. And I've had kids involved in marching band, and with varying degrees of success. A lot of it depends on the kid, and fortunately, we have very accommodating band teachers, and we've had very accommodating orchestra teachers that, and choir teachers that will just accept the kids where they are and push them to be more. I always like it that our music teachers, they don't expect our kids to be the stars, but they expect them to grow, and they expect them to make progress. And I like that. I enjoy seeing my kids involved in that. Well, it's 10 till 1, and some of you may want to grab some lunch before your next session. If you haven't already, Juliana, she got hers. Mine's sitting there. My son, Josh Stock, he just brought his 2 kids over because grandpa's going to take him to a birthday party. And Josh brought me Wendy's. Yeah, he brought me Wendy's. So that's my son, in case you didn't know.
Presenting at 2.
He's presenting it too. What are you
Well, I'm
presenting?
not really presenting. I'm facilitating it.
You're facilitating?
I'm teacher leadership.
Okay, teacher leadership. So, that's it too. So look for his session. I have the privilege of teaching in the same building with my son. Our classrooms are right across the hall from each other, and which is hilarious. And what's even more funny, the elementary school next door, my daughter-in-law, Jenica Stock, teaches there. So we can have students who had Mrs. Stock in 5th grade, and they may have Mr. Stock for 6th grade language arts. So that blows their minds. But then when they meet me and find out I'm another Mrs. Stock, their little 6th grade heads just so we have a lot of fun with that. But no, seriously, it's a real privilege to have watched Joshua as a professional and see his growth. It's been special. Well, thank you for joining me. I am going to put in the chat my Twitter handle and my email address. I'd love to hear how your next year goes, and I'd love, because I know Stacy's in a new position. Your first year band teacher, is that right?
Yes, in Lawrence, yes.
And Sydney, you just finished your first year teaching autism in Eudora. So I'd love to hear, I love new teachers, and I would love to hear how your year goes next year. Let me pull up the chat and I'll give you my information. My Twitter handle is at rstocksf. SF stands for Santa Fe Trail. And then my email is rstocksf@gmail.com. I like the rstocksf. It's unusual. I usually don't get it turned down when I choose it as a username. So that's who I am. And keep in touch. I hope you enjoy the rest of your sessions. Deb, thank you for helping me today. And I'm going to go ahead and leave the meeting up for just a minute or two, but feel free to go get ready for your next session. Thank you for joining me. Juliana, I always love having you. I love your accent, and I love listening to you talk. I love it.
Thank you.
Rhonda, thank you for having this session, and thanks to everybody who joined us today. It was great conversation.
Thanks, Deb. I'm going to go ahead and close. Have a good afternoon, Deb.